The day I stood in my scrubs at my mother's kitchen table, shaking, holding a phone that had just shown me a photo I can never unsee. That was the day I understood what it meant to lose two people at once. I'm a nurse. I've spent 7 years in a Level I trauma center in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've held the hands of strangers while their families fell apart in the waiting room. I know what grief looks like on a face. I know what shock does to a body. But nothing. Not one single night shift, not one code blue, not one family I've had to sit down and deliver the worst news to prepared me for what my best friend and my fiancé did to me 3 weeks before our wedding. Let me back up. I met him at a charity 5K when I was 26. He was volunteering at the water station, laughing too loud at his own joke, handing out paper cups of Gatorade like he was running the place. I almost kept running. Something made me slow down. He handed me a cup, looked directly at me, and said, "You look like you're about to either win this race or die. Either way, respect." I laughed so hard I nearly choked. His name was Ethan. He called me the next day. For 3 years, he was the steadiest thing in my life. I was working nights, double shifts, picking up extra hours in the float pool when we needed money. He was in pharmaceutical sales, traveling a lot, but he always texted when he landed. He always called on his lunch break. We had a routine. Sunday morning farmer's market, Tuesday night takeout, Friday wine on the back porch of the little rental house we shared in Plaza Midwood. I thought we were building something. My best friend since college. I'll call her my best friend because that's what I thought she was. Had been in my life for 9 years by then. We met freshman year in the nursing program at UNC Charlotte. She dropped out after sophomore year, moved into event planning, and somehow we never lost each other. She was my maid of honor. She had already bought her dress. It was sage green. I remember thinking she was going to look beautiful in it. I should have seen things earlier. I didn't. There was a weekend in October, 8 months before the wedding, when Ethan told me he was going to a sales conference in Raleigh, Thursday to Sunday. I was working that weekend anyway. 3 2-half-hour shifts back to back, so I didn't think anything of it. I came home Sunday night at 7 a.m., still in my compression socks, smelling like hospital antiseptic, and I couldn't sleep. I made coffee. I opened my laptop to start researching centerpieces because our venue coordinator had been emailing me all week. I don't know why I opened his email tab. It was already pulled up on the browser. I wasn't snooping. His email was just there. And the subject line of the message at the top of his inbox was her name. Not her full name, just her name. Like a contact you text every day, like someone you don't need to explain. I sat there for a long time, long enough for the coffee to go cold, long enough to feel my hand stop shaking and go completely still, which is somehow worse than shaking. I didn't confront him that day. I know people think that's strange. But when you work in emergency medicine, you learn very quickly that a reaction in the first 30 seconds of a crisis is almost always the wrong reaction. You breathe, you assess, you figure out what you're actually dealing with before you act. So I breathed. I assessed. I found 3 months of messages. Not all of them, he wasn't careless enough for that, but enough. Enough to know that Raleigh wasn't a sales conference. Enough to know that she had been in my house while I was working nights. Enough to know that at some point my sage green bridesmaid dress had become a joke between them. Something she had sent him a photo of, laughing, saying she'd have to wear it for now. For now. I closed the laptop. I went to work my next shift. I did not cry. Not yet. The confrontation, when it came, was quiet. It was a Tuesday. He came home and I was sitting at the kitchen table with my hands flat on the surface, the way you sit when you've made a decision and you just need someone else to arrive so you can execute it. I told him I knew. I told him I'd known for 2 weeks. I told him I needed him to leave and not come back. He didn't deny it. That surprised me, and then it didn't. He sat down across from me and he said he was sorry and that it just happened. That phrase, that terrible, cowardly phrase, and that he had been meaning to tell me. I asked him when, exactly, he had been planning to tell me. 3 weeks before the wedding? 2? He didn't answer. I gave him 2 hours to pack what he needed, and I sat on the back porch while he did it. She called me that night. I didn't pick up. She texted me, "We need to talk. Please." I texted back, "I know, we don't." I called the venue the next morning and canceled. I called my mother and told her. I called the caterer, the florist, the photographer. I notified the guests by email. Brief, no details. And I went back to work. I did not fall apart. Not in front of anyone. But I did fall apart. I want to be honest about that, because I think women in my position are often expected to perform a kind of strength that looks like not feeling things, and that's not what strength actually is. I cried in the shower for 3 weeks. I lost 8 pounds because food tasted like nothing. I sat in the break room at work and stared at the wall between patients. One of the older nurses on my unit, she's been a nurse for 30 years, the kind of woman who has seen everything and says very little, sat down next to me one afternoon and said, "You don't have to be fine. You just have to keep moving." She didn't know what had happened. She just knew I wasn't fine. I kept moving. I found a 1-bedroom apartment in Noda, the arts district on the north side of Charlotte. It was small. The kitchen was barely big enough for 2 people. The bathroom tiles were green, which I hated. But the windows faced east, and every morning the light came in and hit the hardwood floors in a way that made the whole place look like something. I bought my own furniture. I started cooking again, slowly. I started running because the trauma center was 2 miles from my apartment, and I needed something to do with the mornings that didn't belong to anyone else. The months that followed were the quietest of my adult life. I'm not going to pretend they were peaceful. Quiet and peaceful are not the same thing. Quiet is just what's left when you remove all the noise that turned out to be someone else's chaos wearing the costume of your life. I had to learn the difference between loneliness and solitude. I had to learn that I had spent 3 years organizing my schedule around someone who was, it turned out, using the gaps. My mother was not subtle about her concern. She called twice a week, sent me articles about therapy I was already going, which I did not tell her because I didn't want to alarm her further, and suggested, gently and then less gently, that I come home to Asheville for the holidays. I went home for Thanksgiving. That was my first mistake, not Thanksgiving itself. Thanksgiving was fine. It was just the 4 of us, my mother and father and my younger sister and me, and we ate turkey and watched football, and my father fell asleep on the couch at 3 p.m. The way he does every year without fail, and for a few hours it felt like nothing had changed. Christmas was different. My mother's sister, my aunt, hosts Christmas at her place in Asheville every year. It's a big house, big gathering, extended family and a few family friends, people I've known all my life and people I barely recognize. I hadn't been to Christmas in 2 years because Ethan and I had been alternating between families. This year, obviously, I was coming alone, and everyone knew what had happened in the general, softened way that families communicate. They knew something had gone wrong. They just didn't know the shape of it. My sister knew the shape of it. My sister is 4 years younger than me. She was always the one who got along with everyone. Easy personality. The kind of person who makes friends in line at the grocery store. I had been the serious one. The one who studied, who planned, who built things carefully. She and I had our friction over the years, the way siblings do. But I thought we were solid. I thought she was on my side. She arrived at the Christmas party with her boyfriend. They'd been together about a year, a guy she'd met through a work happy hour. I didn't know him well. She introduced us at Thanksgiving, and he seemed fine, quiet, a little reserved. At Christmas, she introduced him to every room as her serious boyfriend, the one, maybe forever. I smiled and said all the right things and went to get another drink. It was about 45 minutes into the party when I overheard it. I was in the hallway near the kitchen, not hiding, just pausing, the way you do at large family gatherings, when you need 15 seconds alone to remember who you are. And I heard my sister's voice from around the corner, and then a few of our cousins laughing, and then the sentence that I have replayed more times than I want to admit. Honestly, I think she was always the type who is going to end up alone. She's just so closed off. Some women are like that. It's sad, but it's not surprising. Laughter. More than one person. I knew who they were talking about. I stood in that hallway for a long time. Long enough to feel every single thing and then to feel nothing. which is what happens when the pain gets so big it trips a circuit breaker somewhere in your chest. I walked back into the party. I said goodbye to my aunt. I told my mother I had an early shift, which was a lie. And I hugged my father, who patted my back the way fathers do, like he was trying to transmit something through his hands that he didn't have words for. I drove back to Charlotte that night. 4 hours. I made it to the city limits before I had to pull over. I sat in a gas station parking lot on I-85 for 20 minutes, and then I drove home and I went to bed. I want to tell you that I let it go. I didn't. Not immediately. I sat with that sentence for weeks. I turned it over like a stone, checking both sides. Closed off. Sad. Not surprising. I thought about every holiday I had worked so she could have off. I thought about the time she had a panic attack before a job interview, and I drove 45 minutes to sit with her in her car in the parking lot. I thought about the text chain we had. Hundreds of messages, little things, inside jokes, the ordinary language of sisters. I thought about what closed off actually means when a woman works night shifts in a trauma center and still shows up. And then I decided something. I decided I was done performing strength as smallness. Done making myself easy to overlook so other people could feel comfortable. Done being the responsible one, the serious one, the closed-off one, as if being careful with yourself is a character flaw. I started quietly to build. It happened in pieces, the way real things do. I was accepted into a nurse practitioner program at UNC Charlotte that spring. Something I'd been putting off because the timing was never right. There was always a reason to wait. I enrolled. I kept working. I rearranged my life entirely around what I was building, and it fit in a way that surprised me, the way things sometimes fit when you stop trying to make room for someone else's comfort. I met him at a continuing education seminar. Infectious disease protocol, not exactly the most romantic setting. He was presenting, which I didn't know when I sat down in the third row. He was a physician with a practice group based in Charlotte, had done his residency at Johns Hopkins, was funny in the way that smart people are funny, quickly, without warning, like a door opening in a wall. He asked me after the session if I wanted coffee. I said yes. His name is Joel. I'm going to tell you about Joel the way you should hear about someone, not as a rescue, not as a reward, but as a person who appeared at the right moment, because I was finally the kind of person who could recognize someone worth knowing. He knew early on that I had been through something. I didn't give him details right away. He didn't ask for them. He just waited. The way people wait when they're actually paying attention. On our fourth date, over dinner at a place in Southend that I'd been wanting to try for years, I told him the outline of it. He listened without flinching. When I was done, he said, "For what it's worth, you don't seem closed off to me. You seem like someone who thinks before she speaks, which is rarer than people realize." I had to look at the menu for a minute. We dated for a year and a half. I graduated from my NP program. I transitioned from the trauma floor to a position as a nurse practitioner with a cardiology group. Better hours, more continuity with patients, the kind of work that lets you actually know the people you're caring for. We moved in together last spring into a house in Dilworth we found on a Sunday morning while we were walking the neighborhood. We stood in the backyard and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think yes." We got engaged in October. I had not spoken to my sister in almost 2 years when my cousin reached out to tell me about the reunion. Our family has a reunion every few years. Nothing formal, just a gathering at a rented lake house in the mountains. This year it was near Brevard, about 90 minutes from Asheville. My mother had been mentioning it since spring. I kept saying I'd think about it. Joel said, whatever I decided, he would support. He meant it. I decided to go. I don't know exactly what I was expecting. Maybe nothing. Maybe I went because I was finally in a place where I didn't need anything from the outcome. I wasn't going to confront my sister. I wasn't going to explain myself or demand an apology or perform any version of righteous anger. I was just going to show up as myself, the self I had built out of the quietest, hardest years of my life. Joel drove. We talked the whole way about nothing in particular. A podcast we'd been listening to, a patient of his who'd made him laugh. what we wanted to do with the back bedroom in the new house. When we pulled up to the lake house, I felt calm in a way I hadn't expected. My sister was there with her boyfriend. They were on the dock when we arrived, the same couple I'd seen at Christmas 2 years ago, still together, apparently still doing well. She saw me first. I watched her face go through something, surprise, and then a careful rearrangement into warmth. She waved. I waved back. The afternoon was easy, the way family gatherings can be when enough time has passed that everyone is just tired of the weight of things. We ate, we swam, the kids ran around the dock. My father told the same 3 stories he always tells. My mother tried to coordinate a group photo that never quite happened. And then Joel came around the side of the house from where he'd been talking to my uncle, and my sister, who had been standing nearby, turned to see who he was. I watched it happen in real time. The slight freeze. The recognition. Because Joel had gone to the same university she had, they hadn't known each other well, but she knew who he was. She knew his name. She knew without me having to say a word exactly what he did and exactly what it meant. She looked at me. I looked back at her. I didn't say anything pointed. I didn't need to. I introduced him the way you introduce someone you love. Simply, warmly, without performance. This is Joel. We're engaged. And then I turned back to the conversation I was having with my aunt, because that was all there was to say. Later, near the end of the evening, my sister came and sat beside me on the porch. We were quiet for a moment. The lake was going dark. Someone had lit the fire pit. "He seems really good," she said. "You seem really good," she said. "You seem really good." I nodded. "I am." She opened her mouth, closed it. She was working up to something, I could tell. The apology she'd been carrying around, maybe, or some version of it. I let the silence sit. I wasn't going to help her across it. She said, "I'm sorry for what I said at Christmas." She knew I'd heard. She'd probably known for 2 years. I looked at her for a long time. And then I said, "I know." That was all. Not because I had nothing else. Not because the anger was gone. Some of it is still there, if I'm honest, folded down small enough to carry without it slowing me down. But because the truest thing I had learned in those 2 years was that I didn't owe anyone a scene. I didn't owe anyone a dramatic forgiveness or a clean resolution. I owed myself the life I had built, and I was living it, and that was enough. Joel found me on the porch a few minutes later. He handed me a cup of coffee, sat down next to me, looked out at the lake. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. And I meant it. We drove home with the windows down, the mountain air cold and sharp coming through, the radio on low. I looked at the ring on my hand in the dark, the way it caught the passing headlights. And I thought about that gas station parking lot on I-85. I thought about the green bathroom tiles. I thought about the Sunday mornings running 2 miles to work before anyone else was awake, and what I was building with each one. Some people wait for justice to arrive, like weather, something that happens to them, something they have no control over. I used to be that person. I think about her sometimes. She was standing in a hallway at a Christmas party, listening to laughter, not yet knowing that the life she was about to build was going to be quieter and smaller, and so much more entirely hers. She would have been relieved, I think. She would have kept moving.